A blessed and a pleasant day to one and all. Again, I am lovely B. Mendoza from Bsed English 2B, and I am your discussant for New American Voices of Later Period in American Literature. But before we proceed to our discussion, I want to know how are things going. Well, I hope that you're all doing fine every day. So without further ado, let us start learning new things. Things to do before, during, and after the discussion. Before, kindly bring out your notebook and pen. During, make sure to listen very carefully and to meaningfully use the pen and paper or notebook by jotting down all the necessary information that I'll be sharing. After, review your notes and reflect on it. At the end of the lesson, the students should be able to Preparatory activity question. How does the language affect literature? Introduction to New American Voices. A great call for an identity that was exclusively American began to grow when America came into a generation of native-born Americans, and they longed persistently for a distinguished American expression of themselves through their literature. The self-made man became an icon that was distinctively representative of the American ideal. Here grew a nation that extolled the characteristics of individual independence among its people. A country besieged with issues of social reform, its forerunner being slavery. Although these ideas were as old as mankind, they became issues that were intrinsically commensurate with American literature's individuality. The universal themes of individualism, self-reliance, and slavery became the building blocks responsible for the creation of a quality American literary voice. To further understand this, let me explain you each of those universal themes. First is individualism. Why is individualism crucial in American culture? We all know that the United States has one of the most individualistic cultures in the world. Americans are more likely to prioritize themselves over a group, and they value independence and autonomy. They highly believe that relying on one's own and personal independence are the most important virtues they possess. It emphasizes personality and insists that personality should be kept by the independence of thinking and action. Individualism is becoming the core culture of America. Second is self-reliance. Americans obviously value self-reliance and perceive it as a great requirement to attain and ensure individual freedom. To its simplest sense, given their tremendous distrust of government, also stemming from the American Revolution, they expect to be successful through their own efforts. Lastly, slavery. The most basic purpose of slavery is to rid oneself of work and force the hideous labor upon someone else. Since the time of our more primitive era, particularly American societies have taken slaves from war and conquest and forced them to do their workaday tasks. American literature is considered to be one of the most unique bodies of literature because it clearly comprises with number of voices and cultures to convey, which is vital and of course fundamental to gain the power to transform opinions and demand stereotypes in both obvious and obscured ways. Krista Smith Anderson started on an ambitious travel across America, demonstrating how voice writing elicited a profound sense of time and place in ways no other medium can. Over the centuries, American authors have framed a great body of work, often reflecting voices that are distinctly American, from the river raft philosophizing of a poor Mississippi Valley boy, to the words walking without masters completing the journey of a woman descended from slaves, to the border tongue conflates increasingly finding a place on the page. The language of American literature has many variations and of course, voices. American voice writers show the potential of literature to catch realities of time, place, and above all, people. Distinctively, American voices elucidate what power does the language has. Oftentimes, these works or the literary pieces of new American voices teach readers that making a great literature can be found and initially started in their own communities, in the languages and dialect they hear every day. A preeminent American voice writer, Lee Smith, who always looks to her Appalachian roots for material, a work of literature authenticated the speech with which she grew up. As what she declared, I had not understood that the language of my childhood could be the language of great literature. She told writer Silas House when speaking about the personal impact of James Steele's novel, River of Earth. Ralph Ellison credited his background as a jazz musician, as well as the time he spent working in barbershops where oral art flourished, for helping him to create such groundbreaking works as Invisible Man. Ellison turned to fictional truth to reveal the human complexity which stereotypes are intended to conceal. The power of literature to exceed and transcend stereotypes and discredit myth are conspicuous in the works of American literature. These voices are artful in their own ways. It's basically the reason why in Tobias Wolff's short story entitled Bullet in the Brain, a cynical book critic who can't stop being sarcastic even to save his life, turns back to a voice-driven childhood memory just before his death. In his dying moments, Anders, the ill-fated critic, doesn't remember his first love or even the birth of his daughter. To help you visualize these episodes, let me share you the movie version of the short story. But to inform you, I only included the climax down to Dinoma, since I've already shared you the initiating conflict, and so it wouldn't cost you so much time.
This program is rated SPG. It contains scenes with themes, language, violence, sex, horror, or drugs, which may not be suitable for children. Strong parental guidance is advised.
After striking the cranium, the bullet was moving at 900 feet per second. A pathetically sluggish, glacial pace compared to the synaptic lightning that flashed around it. Once in the brain, the bullet came under the mediation of brain time, which gave Anders the leisure to contemplate a scene in a phrase he would have abhorred, pass before his eyes. Given what Anders did remember, it is worth noting what he did not remember. He did not remember his first lover, Sherry. He did not remember his wife, whom he had also loved before she exhausted him with her predictability. He did not remember standing just outside his daughter's door as she lectured her bear about his naughtiness and described the truly appalling punishments Paws would receive unless he changed his ways. He did not remember his dying mother saying that she should have stabbed his father in his sleep. None of these things did he remember, not one. He did not remember Keats, Shakespeare, or Herbert. He did not remember a single line of the hundreds of poems he had committed to memory so he could give himself the shivers at will. Nor did he remember seeing a woman leap to her death from the building opposite his own, just days after his daughter was born. He did not remember when he began to regard the heap of papers on his desk with boredom and dread, or when he grew angry at the students for writing them. He did not remember when everything began to remind him of something else. Of all this, he remembered nothing. What he remembered was simply heat, yellow grass, a baseball field, the whir of insects as he trails the other boys of the neighborhood to a pickup game. A couple of the others argue the relative genius of Mantle and Mays. They have been worrying this subject all summer, and it has become tedious to Anders. an oppression, like the heat. Finally, the last two boys arrived. This one kid who lived near the dump and his cousin from Mississippi. Anders has never met the cousin before and will never see him again. When they've chosen sides, someone asks the cousin what position he wants to play, and he says,
"Shortstop. Short's the best position there is."
"Short's the best position there is." Anders wants to hear the cousin repeat what he has just said, but knows better than to ask. The others will think he's being a jerk, ragging the kid for his grammar. But that isn't it. Not at all. It's that Anders is strangely roused, elated by those two final words, their pure unexpectedness and their music. So, the bullet is already in the brain. It won't be outrun forever or charmed to a halt. In the end, it will do its work and leave the troubled skull behind, dragging its comet tail of memory and hope and talent and love into that anonymous hall of commerce. But for now, Anders can still make time. Time for the shadows to lengthen on the grass. Time for the tethered dog to bark at the flying ball. Time for the boy in left field to smack his sweat-blackened mitt and softly chant, "There is, there is, there is."
So, what are the themes of this short story? The first that is explored by the author is the theme of nostalgia and innocence. When Anders is shot, various scenes from his life, both remembered and not, begin to play out in his mind. These scenes illustrate Anders' past emotional innocence, showing how he used to be the type of man to attend anti-war rallies, memorize poetry, and wake up laughing. Second is the relativity of time. Time is a multi-layered theme in Bullet in the Brain. Wolf writes about real-world time, the fantastical notion of brain time, and the passage of time. In the very first sentence, Anders arrives at the bank near closing time and gets stuck in a very long line. Another theme introduced in this story is respect. Respect may be the main axis of where all the other themes derive from. Respect is when one admires someone else and acknowledges their accomplishments, abilities, qualities, and achievements and treat them in a way in order for them to feel the admiration. The fact that the author emphasizes on the fact that Anders no longer remembers what giving respect means is somehow a way of extolling the significance of respect and showing that the lack of respect leads to a life without a point. The character of Anders teaches the reader a great lesson. There's no need for sarcasm towards others when they have done nothing to you. Everyone is equal and there's no point in treating another human being in a bad way. Here is my generalization. To wrap up everything, New American Voices marked the beginning of significant literary movements initiated by a large number of writers whose literary pieces greatly impacted and delved American political and cultural views during the post-war era where intense anxiety and dynamic creative change happened, where African Americans quickened the pace of the struggle for equality by challenging segregation in court. New American Voices strengthened the realities of time, place, and above all, complexities of people. Moreover, it proves that language is one of the most powerful tools we can use to gain radical change. New American Voices aim not to expand the consumption of readers, but to reject the standard narrative exploration of American values, economic materialism, explicit portrayals of the human condition, sexual liberation and exploration, and to awaken the minds of their fellows of social constructions. New American Voices is an important topic of American literature to be tackled. With this, the following reporters will discuss further the periods or eras and the famous literary works produced during this time. Closure activity. How does the language affect literature? That would be all for my report. I know you learned something. Once again, I am lovely B. Mendoza, wishing you a great day ahead. Hope you all safe. Bye-bye.